Right. We're getting ready to go here. I've got all my notes. I'm glad we finally fixed that microphone thing because no one can eavesdrop on us. You think anybody in the audience is going to notice that I dyed my beard today?
Did you get struck by lightning?
Welcome, everybody, to Morally Abhorrent, and we mourn. We mourn because today was the final day of group play, and there are encouraging rumors out there, Witty, that the groups of four may return. FIFA has expanded the next World Cup and hasn't announced a plan, so this crazy final match day of the group that we had that kind of went out on a whimper because I believe the AC broke in one of those stadiums, and we'll get into how Serbia has trailed off in every second half that they've played, but we got spoiled. That yesterday and the day before was not the norm when it comes to these final group matches, and for a good 45 minutes, it was looking like we were getting ready to batten down the hatches and have another crazy soccer witching hour. It didn't end up happening. Cameroon gets a nice emotional win for them on the way out, but they're eliminated. Brazil finished top. They go out on a loss. No teams have 9 points. No teams advance to the knockout stages being perfect, having a W every time they've gone out there. In Switzerland, advance out of the group and take 3 points off of the feisty and hot-headed Serbian team. Let's take a treetop view on the day as a whole because there were early morning games, and I think that provided far more excitement. So let's turn our attention over there. Sonny, what a superstar.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. I hand it over to you to sing the praises of Sonny. It is his day.
Heung-min Son of South Korea. So that game is 1-1 between South Korea and Portugal, and a long ball gets hit, and Heung-min Son is chasing after it. Now, Son came into this game with a facial injury that almost ruled him out of the tournament. He's been playing with a mask, and he hasn't really made that big of an impact. As a matter of fact, early in this game, I kind of saw the worst of what Christian Pulisic can be for the U.S., which is an over-reliance upon him taking too many touches, him not involving his teammates. And this was the exact moment where the opposite happened. He's in behind, but not really, because he's at full pace, and Portugal have 3 defenders in front of him and 3 defenders behind him ready to converge.
That was crazy.
And yet he somehow managed to go forward at the exact right pace, inch forward, to the point where he could eventually play the through ball in for Hee Chan-wang. And all of a sudden, he's in, perfectly dispatched, we should say. A great finish from him. And South Korea are not only beating Portugal, but knocking Uruguay out of the World Cup. And then all of a sudden, Uruguay, and they freak out, and they're like, go forward, go forward. They just needed one given the tie-breaking situation, when they had kind of closed up shop. They took off Darwin Nunez and Luis Suarez in that second half, basically saying, well, we're playing as if we're going to protect this scenario rather than playing for the eventual tie-breaking scenarios. And ultimately, in a World Cup that was a bit of a waste from Uruguay's point of view. But well done, South Korea. Well done, Asia, at this World Cup, because they're not a continent that normally sends 3 and 4 teams into the knockout round. And Heung-min Son was kind of the star of the day on the basis of that one play alone.
Yeah, pretty unexpected for South Korea to go through when you looked at all the scenarios entering the day. For Uruguay, massive disappointment. This was ushering in a new era, and the old era kind of sticking around and handing it off. You had Cavani and you had Luis Suarez out there. Godin's still going to be out there for the next 20 years. I'm not writing him off, but Muslera, even though he wasn't the choice keeper, he was still on this roster. So there was a nice little meld of old and new, super talented, a crazy talented team. If they found a way to make it to the knockout stages and play Brazil, that would have been a put the kids to bed scenario. For me, their failings, and I may be entering this with some sort of baggage, being a frustrated Inter Miami season ticket holder.
The two of us do.
Yeah, Diego Alonso, sacked by Inter Miami, fails upwards and becomes Uruguay's national team manager. really puzzling decisions. And you just highlighted what I think will be the final nail in the coffin for him. I'd be really surprised if he comes back because of the decision to not chase another goal. Really perplexing. Really perplexing. If we learn one thing about all the Asian teams and lumping in the Middle Eastern teams that also are in that qualifying region, and one Oceania team that is forced to be part of Asia because they're just too good for Oceania, none of these teams have any quit in them. They've all fought to the death. And for Uruguay to think that they'd feel comfortable with their lead over Ghana and that South Korea wouldn't go all out trying to get all 3 points there, it was really, really confusing. And there's one thing to have an attitude. There's another thing entirely to start changing up the personnel. And you could tell from the reaction once that sideline, and I know Luis Suarez is a really emotional player, wears his emotions on his sleeve, but there was plenty of time for them to chase another goal in that game. And they kind of took the L. I saw a video of Cavani getting in a fight with a VAR machine. They were really frustrated with the officiating. And if you're from Uruguay, you're probably still pounding the table thinking that you have a case. What'd you make of the officiating in that one?
Yeah, I thought it was strange the degree to which that was highlighted. I heard as well that the Telemundo broadcast was really highlighting this. I will be honest, my sound was on for Portugal, South Korea. So I don't really know why it was sort of that aggressive. Even so, for me, the first incident that leads to the penalty for Ghana is a penalty. Is it Rocher, the goalkeeper for Uruguay? He comes out, and I think even if he doesn't necessarily make a big contact on Mohamed Kudus, it was still a situation where he comes and misses and gets nowhere near the ball. Kudus pokes it beyond him, and I thought fouled him, even if he doesn't necessarily make a big contact. But even still, even if you disagree with the decision, Andre Ayew missed the penalty. And so it's not really
terribly done.
Awful. It was an awful penalty that he takes a sort of deliberate, slow run up. And anytime I see that now, I'm like, oh no, it's in his head and he's trying to send the keeper the wrong way. And fair play to the goalkeeper for making the save. But ultimately, it's inconsequential in the pattern of the game. And then the last the last moment where Cavani gets a slight clip on the back of the heel from the Ghanaian defender, I didn't think it was that obvious of a decision. I was watching on Fox, and Kobe Jones, the analyst, said not a penalty. They didn't even go to the refereeing expert to see if he thought it was a penalty. So I just don't know where the outrage has come from an officiating standpoint. Over the course of play, you can have your beefs, but in terms of the major decisions, I don't think they had that big of an impact on the game. I think ultimately the conservative tactics of Diego Alonso, not just in this game, but throughout the entire group stage, has cost Uruguay their place in the knockout round.
They had one of the more loaded teams. Valverde was becoming one of the best midfielders in the world. Darwin Nunez, they kept giving him more and more space to mess up. And I would have liked a more direct approach from Darwin Nunez. I don't get the appeal with Diego Alonso. And in retrospect, I don't get the hire. And it's a missed opportunity because this is a team that could have really done damage. The pen was poorly taken, but there was some weird callbacks to 2010 throughout all of this. It's you can't mention these two teams without mentioning what happened in the quarterfinal between Ghana and Uruguay in 2010, where Luis Suarez, and as many would claim, a bit of poor form, knocked down a certain goal. Ghana then can't capitalize after he gets a just red card, and they are awarded a pen, and then they end up going out, and Uruguay continues their run. So some poetic justice for Ghana, and I've gotten a kick out of the Ghanaian fans celebrating and rubbing in the face of Uruguay, and I'm sure they take solace in the videos of Luis Suarez being emotional, but very classless display from Uruguay at the end of that game. It's a borderline call, and okay, you're frustrated. I understand you worked 4 years for this, but they were violent towards the official. It got really ugly there to trash the VAR machine. It's just it's a classless way to go out, and it's really frustrating because I highly rate Cavani. I actually got a kick out of some of his candid post-game comments, kind of throwing his manager under the bus. I understand the frustration, but really unbecoming, and a sad way for Luis Suarez's international career to end, though I think many are happy with it considering he's one of the game's great villains.
Yeah, especially the Ghanaian fans who, although their World Cup ended today, they get the solace of having knocked Uruguay out by Uruguay not having won by enough. But sort of on the flip side of that, I do think that when you look at Diego Alonso's tenure in charge of this Uruguay team, it will kind of be measured just on the first two games of the group stage.
Mhm.
Because when he takes over in January, Uruguay were not even in the playoff places. As a matter of fact, his objective was get us into the playoff places in South American World Cup qualifying. They probably needed like 7 points to do that. And then he only went and won every single game that he was in charge of in qualifying. And as a matter of fact, his big appeal was that his tactics were way more aggressive than his predecessor, Oscar Washington Tavares, and who was the manager of Uruguay for like 16 years. He was there for forever. And his tactics were always very conservative, but Alonso came in, sort of took the reins off a little bit. They scored a bunch of goals. They won a bunch of games. And then you get to the World Cup, and all of a sudden he's back to being the conservative manager that we saw at Inter Miami and frankly have seen at other stops as well. And so it's interesting, sort of the arc where he didn't just sort of follow what got him there. Similar to the story we talked about yesterday with John Herdman in Canada. Just follow what got you there. And ultimately, they are now out of this World Cup, which it was a real shock to me. I like them based off of how they played in qualifying earlier this year. And I thought that they were actually probably the best long shot at 40-1 to win this thing. And yet they're out in the group stage. And I think you saw today, particularly in the first 60 minutes, the evidence of why people were pretty confident about this Uruguay team. Because if you just take the handbrake off, they can go play. That front six is talented. And when the fullbacks get involved, they're talented. So for me, looking at this team, I'm frankly stunned that they're out. But it was kind of cool to watch that moment happen towards the end of South Korea getting the goal and then Uruguay kind of freaking out. It was all the drama that we love to see at this tournament. And then we got for most of the groups. Actually, I think all of them, even the group that was decided late, that was a winner take all game that finished 3-2. And if like just on the basis of that drama alone, it was amazing.
I'm going to take that on ramp in a moment. I should mention to our audience Jordan Brenner and Peter Keating of Underdogs, one of our Le Batard and Friends podcasts, are going to be joining us here in a couple of minutes to paint some scenarios for us and maybe give us some tips as we look to give you another winner here on your DraftKings Sportsbook. So I'm looking forward to that. I'll get to the later afternoon games in a second, but I want to continue this postmortem on Uruguay just a little bit longer, throw a little bit more salt in the wounds when it comes to Diego Alonso, because reputed to be a very good defensive coach, too defensive when he got to MLS, didn't do anything to unlock the talent that he had at his disposal. It seemed as though he learned the lessons. You were one of the favorites to get out of this group. You had matchups in this group that your style of play in going at teams, I'd favor your chances. It's you and Portugal very clearly at the top of the talent pool in that group. And if you're having to go at other teams, you should win those games. You should take 3 points from them. I don't understand why he decided to revert back to a lot of his bad habits and just in-game management, which was another thing that really frustrated me from his time over here in Inter Miami. He totally missed the assignment today. A really poor showing from the manager. A lot of people were scratching their heads over the appointment when it happened, considering how poorly his experience in MLS went. You'd figure because it's a national team, because of his roots, he'd tap into where they really were most successful, more conservative approach, but really unlocking the talent that they had up top. No matter how conservative Uruguay were, they had guys that could express their joy in the final third in Forlan or Luis Suarez when they were really cooking, and we just never got to see that. I think the idea was to have Darwin Nunez be that person, but he's not at that level yet. And I think we also have to blame some of the players here too. They didn't rise to the occasion. Yes, there were some good moments, but Darwin Nunez, a player that comes in very hyped in the Premier League, we've seen him fall on his face some too. He wasn't atrocious in this tournament. There weren't the highlight reel bonehead blooper plays that we'd seen from him in Liverpool just yet, but he was, once again, a lot of hype, a lot of show, not enough go.
Yeah, and I think some of that is to do with the lack of attacking identity from this Uruguay team at this tournament, and ultimately strikers feed on service. And the kind of rap on Uruguay before was, there was a lot of midfield players that weren't really of the level of their forwards, but then all of a sudden Betancourt comes through and Valverde comes through, and even this team, they have Pelistri on one wing and they have de Arraez Caeta, which is one of the tougher names to say at this tournament.
I didn't want to say I wanted to give him credit, but I didn't want to say his name.
Yeah,
and he was pretty solid.
Yeah, no, he was good today, and so they keep bringing through again, sort of against the odds, given their population size. One of the better generations of players at this tournament, at least from the start. And ultimately, the question is, when do you flip your national identity?
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that one man, Oscar Tavares, was sort of instrumental in building that. He was the sort of under-20 coach and the national team coach and the technical director. He ran that program and has built them to where they are right now. But when do you decide that we're no longer that nation anymore? We're not the underdogs with great strikers. We're just a good team. And let's go out and play like we're just a good team. And that, for me, has been the thing that they have failed at this tournament. And it can happen so quickly, because I actually thought in the third game, they weren't that team. Although, like we saw with Diego Alonso in MLS, he loves to set up shop when he's got a lead. It's like, all right, we're good. We've got the lead. We're going to win this game. Let's close things down. And that's a complete lack of recognition of the scenarios in the other game. If you're saying that at 1-1, when the game can flip on a goal, why? They should have been throwing attackers for defenders on and kept going.
Was Diego Alonso holed up somewhere, not watching what had happened prior to? It's not like he didn't have very recent examples from this very tournament of things going bonkers and changing in a second. There was a 60-second stretch where Costa Rica were through. You would think that would wake him up, but no. Very staunch, very disappointing for one of the more balanced teams I felt entering this tournament. But there was one thing that always concerned me about them. It was Diego Alonso. And I think while some players didn't show up, while some older players probably stayed on one cup cycle too long, ultimately the manager lacked ideas and got in the way. So harsh from us, bitter from us, maybe, but just not a good job from Diego Alonso. Let's go to Serbia and Switzerland before we welcome on the underdogs, and really spotlight one of the games that I was most excited for today. Jan Sommer falls ill, and as soon as that news comes out, I'm hitting the over, because Jan Sommer is a demigod between the sticks, and Serbia, they've had really fun games. Really poor showing from their defensive backline. Branislav Ivanovic is not walking through that door. Now, this is a Serbian team that came into this tournament one of the victims of a Winter World Cup. If this was a Summer World Cup, they'd probably make a deep run. I'd pick them to make a deep run, thinking that the injuries, if they were fit enough to be out there on the pitch, they'd be fit enough to get these results and go deep. However, it is pretty hard for me to argue that the injuries didn't play a factor, because this team in all three group matches, Chris, fell off a cliff in the second half. They were huffing, they were puffing, they were frustrated, they were losing their cool because they just weren't conditioned to go a full 90.
Yeah, and it's basically everyone in the forward line. In some ways, their game plan must have been, let's get to the 60th minute up by 2 goals and then start making changes. And you'll look back on the game against Cameroon. That really was their undoing, as much as losing today would have put them in a precarious position. But if they hold on to their 3-1 lead against Cameroon, they can approach today completely differently. But then 2 goals in 3 minutes and you can't make changes. You got to keep those guys on and try and get back the victory that you didn't get. But Mitrovic came into this tournament carrying an injury. Kostic came into this tournament carrying an injury. Dusan Vlahovic came into this tournament carrying an injury. And Vlahovic gave it a go today and scored a goal. And like you said, in that first half, the adrenaline and probably the painkillers can get you through. But we saw that as well from a Switzerland point of view with Xherdan Shaqiri, who came into this game carrying an injury, but was sensational for the minutes that he was on the field. But when your attack goes through those players and you're trying to chase the goal, it becomes very easy. Warren Barton on the Fox broadcast is pointing out in the midfield, it was pretty easy to shut those guys down, and you're denying the service to the players that can make the game-changing difference. And when they were firing, one of the best teams to watch at this tournament. This game for the first 60 minutes was a brilliant watch. The goals that were scored, if you haven't seen them, go back and watch the highlights of Serbia, Switzerland, because they were sensational goals, but Serbia did not have the juice to hang on. And I actually think this Swiss team is a tad bit underrated.
Yeah.
I think because they don't really have like a clear identity or a clear star or something that, like, the Swiss are sort of innocuous. They have a bit of a Poland quality to them, but I think they've got more dynamism about them. But because of their sort of lack of clear identity, I think there are people that think that this team's kind of boring. But, you know, I think this team is good enough to not only get through to the knockout round, which I think they comprehensively deserve today, but I think they could cause up some problems once we get into the round of 16. But Serbia, I agree with you. I'm bummed that this tournament didn't come at a better moment of form for them, because I think that you look at that group of talent, and not only are they fantastic, but they are in their primes.
Mm-hmm.
And so that for me is the concern, is that now they are going to have a little bit of a drop off, and can they still be good enough by the time the next Euros comes around? Because this is a team that deserves to do more. They also just don't have enough in defense.
No.
I mean, they're basically playing attackers at wingback. They're playing 3 defenders, 5 midfielders, and two strikers. And when they try and defend, it doesn't work. When they go forward, it's great. But among the more defensively vulnerable teams we saw at this World Cup,
for me, consistently the worst defense that we saw, and that includes Costa Rica, that gave up 7 goals in one game, but they figured it out for at least a match, and it ended up getting a clean sheet. Just a terrible defensive back line for Serbia. And I am bummed as we do this postmortem, because Dusan Tadic is one of my favorite players in the world. He's of an age that's probably the last opportunity that we're going to get to see him in a World Cup. Hopefully this core can stick around and make a go for a European championship. Mitrovic is one of those sneaky young guys, just because he's been playing for so long with one club. You figure he's well into his mid-30s. It's not the case. He's actually 28 years old. Mm-hmm. So, and he's a spectacular player, and he showed it in this tournament. I'm really bummed to see them go, but the injuries that they carried into a Winter World Cup undid them, and that's look, those are the cards that everybody was dealt. France has far more impactful injuries, guys that couldn't even make the pitch for them, that are of much more repute. So, but it's also France, and they have the depth stacked up behind it. If you have these guys at 70%, you don't really have the people to go behind them. Though I am surprised with the amount of depth that they have. Luka Jovic and Filip Kostic, like, these are really good players. For Switzerland, I was really impressed with them, because I understand what you mean by a Poland quality, but Poland, when they set up, particularly in their last match, to be anti-football, I like defensive-minded soccer. They just had people behind the ball for the sake of having them behind the ball. They didn't limit the opportunities. It wasn't good defense, and there wasn't an actual counterattack plan. The Swiss are so organized with their defensive measures. And today, they got coaxed into this fight. They got coaxed into a gunslinging Big 12 match. And Mbolo was there for it. I think he's really separated himself and made himself a star. This is a Switzerland team that is kind of devoid of those stars on the international stage. Their keeper is probably the most famous because he's a mainstay. Granit Xhaka has played for big clubs. Jordan Shaqiri, because of the size of his calves, is probably, and just his odd body, is certainly someone that has a level of fame. But I was really impressed by them. Serbia got in their heads. That was part of their tactics. They were really hot-headed, and Switzerland, Granit Xhaka is there for all the smoke, by the way. He was, I thought for sure he was going to take a stupid card down the final stretch of that. But, this was one of those air raid offense games, and not a game that I think Switzerland would excel. If you would have told me that this was the pace of the game, I would have favored Serbia. I did. I was on them. I liked their chances. But they had enough, and hopefully their keeper can get back to full fitness for the knockout rounds, because as they've always been, they're going to be a really tough out, Chris.
Yeah, and there are players that bring a dynamism that we saw today that was beautiful. I think Ricardo Rodriguez, their left back, has always kind of been like one of those up and coming left back prospects that never really hit at a big level. He's been good in Italy, but we saw a couple of switches, including the ball for a chance for Xherdan Shaqiri. It sort of rose and rose and rose, and it was this beautiful raking 60-yard pass that he can hit that provides that dynamism. The goal that's created by Shaqiri, where he sort of floats a ball in, it's a cheeky little back heel and finished off by Remo Freuler, was a beauty to watch. The goals that were scored today were just sensational. And Switzerland has some of that quality. They've got, I think, a pretty damn good midfield with Freuler and with Xhaka, especially Xhaka. You talk about form. If this World Cup were a year ago, that could have been really bad, but he's come back from the close season and been really good for Arsenal, part of their right now Premier League winning side. And so I like Switzerland. There's
like them
something
a
about
lot too. So's a good player. Rodriguez, I think, at times has dazzled. A really balanced player. I like them a lot, and I that's a goalkeeper in me. But if he comes back, he hasn't really been spectacular this tournament. He is capable of pulling some saves out. There's going to be a moment where you're going to think Switzerland's going to be able to go through because of how special they are in their defense. And now it seems as though for the moment they kind of have an attacking punch that can go along with it. So I'm excited to see them move on. Let's talk very briefly before we welcome in the underdogs about the Brazil match. Cause for concern. This was a rotational squad, a total B team. And I know in our group chats we were saying, well, Brazil's B team could probably make a run to the semis. Turns out Brazil's B team can't even score a goal against Cameroon. Now I'm starting to get a little bit worried about Brazil in first halves. Really slow start. They came on a little bit in the second half. I thought the keeper made some nice plays there. And oh, by the way, if we want to talk about a keeper making nice plays in that Ghana match to keep Uruguay out of the World Cup.
Oh God, the save from Cavani. Holy shit.
That was spectacular. Damn near broke his neck on there. So I want to give the keeper his flowers. I'm sorry I can't remember your name, but holy shit, that was phenomenal.
Yeah, it was Lawrence Atizigi. Well done, sir.
Dude, the save of the tournament so far.
Even though it doesn't count because Cavani was offside. But still save of the tournament for me, Clive.
That's a save of the tournament. Dude damn near killed himself for that title. So I'm going to give him that. Look, I said that I like how Brazil play without Neymar. It was wholly dependent on Vinicius and the rest of the 10 players being out there. So I don't think that there's too much cause for concern here. I thought the African nations really acquitted themselves nicely, even the ones that didn't make it to the knockout stages. They were game in this final group match. A puzzling second yellow on a celebration when they're still technically chasing goal differential. That was a head slapping moment there. Watching that, I'm not concerned about Brazil. Are you?
A little bit. It gives me 2018 vibes. I think in 2018 it was very similar. New manager takes over from Dunga. He was a disaster of a coach in qualifying. New manager takes over. They go unbeaten in their final 12 games in qualifying. They went unbeaten in this round of qualifying in South America. Brazil did. And yet they got to the World Cup and we never, and Brazil ultimately have an expectation that's impossible to hit. Their expectation is they play better soccer than everyone in the world all the time. It's beautiful. The goals they score are amazing. They hit for 4 and they just dazzle you every single second. It's an impossible expectation that they have to hit. And yet they only, in this group stage, I know this is this sort of, having fun with the facts, but they had 1 more point and 1 more goal than the Americans. And like that, that's not what we've come to expect from Brazil. And even like you said, even with a changed team today, you would think that a team that has Anthony, Gabriel Martinelli, Rodrigo, Gabriel Jesus, even Dani Alves out there for one last ride, Alex Telles on the at left back, you would think that team has enough to create more than they did, to get a goal, to win a game. And I know that you don't want to overreact to not beating a team when you've made a bunch of changes, but I just think in the overall, I haven't been wowed by Brazil yet. And last time we were kind of waiting for them to wow us, and then they lost to Belgium in the quarterfinal and kind of went out of the World Cup with a whimper. The bracket that they're in sets up very nicely. Right now, with the way that things look. They play South Korea in the round of 16 instead of Uruguay, and they'll play the winner of Japan and Croatia. So you feel pretty good about Brazil getting to at least a semifinal, but I don't know, man. It hasn't gotten me off my seat yet.
Their defense is still pretty stout. They have their backup keeper, Ederson, made a very special save, and there wasn't an offside player there, so maybe he lays claim to.
I think they've only let up. They've only let up 3 shots on target at this World Cup.
Yeah, so. and that was with the rotational back line over there. I would say that they did impress. However, now with the treetop view, we realize that second half against Serbia. Well, everyone's doing that against Serbia. And I was impressed with how they played. Switzerland are a difficult team to break down in that second match. I'm not too concerned. I hear you. I had a funny Dani Alves moment with my wife where he lined up for a free kick and she complimented his eyes. He sailed one just over the bar. It was a nice attempt from him. And I was like, babe, do you remember who that guy is with the light eyes? She's like, no, should I? I'm like, do you remember the Confederations Cup where Clint Dempsey did the Michael Jackson celebration? And we thought we were beating Brazil in a cup final way back when I had way more hair and all the BC boys were alive. Do you remember that, honey? She said, yes. Dani Alves was a guy that broke our heart while we were at Fritz and Franz watching that game. And he celebrated far too much for our liking.
He made his international debut in 2006.
Yeah, that's wild. That it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool that he got this last ride with them, but my wife looked at me like she thought I was joshing her. We're supposed to be joined here momentarily, Chris, right, by Jordan and Peter of the Underdogs. I would like some betting perspective. Let's welcome them in when we have the opportunity. In the meantime, I will let the audience know that you can check out this podcast on our Le Batard and Friends Network, as you can check out all the pods. Make sure you subscribe to that single feed because you can get everything. I'm like diarrhea mouth when I'm doing promotional reads sometimes. So please do yourself a favor. And if you want some inside angles, not the corny tout business, but some stories behind some interesting situations and spots, some people out there that are that fancy themselves gamblers look for good spots and look for value. And you get the value with the Underdogs. Gentlemen, welcome aboard. I'm excited to have you on because I am all over this World Cup. And after a slow start, after playing all these different variables that I didn't necessarily anticipate that I knew was there, but I didn't really know how they would impact this World Cup, I finally got a read on this bad boy. I really do. So I'm hoping you can give us some tips for this next round of knockout games. Jordan, I begin with you. What do you got for me?
So, well, what do I have? What we specialize in on the Underdogs podcast is talking about.
Wait, is that your soothing voice to calm things down?
Yes. I'm channeling NPK here.
And I'm older than Dani Alves, so I mean, I try to keep it baritonal and mellifluous, so.
We tell stories about why unlikely things happen, right? And so I think the general consensus is soccer is a very random sport. Weird things are going to happen. Unusual things are going to happen. So we cut our teeth basically projecting NCAA tournament upsets for years and years in this thing we call giant killers. So we applied some of those same rationale to the World Cup, and we looked up some history of knockout stages. And you'd think, oh, between penalty kicks and a one-and-done scenario, there's going to be a lot of upsets. Guess what? There's not. There are not a ton of upsets in World Cup knockout stages. So from 2004 to 2018, we looked at matches where there were differences in ELO ratings. Peter, you want to explain what ELO ratings is for the real dorks out there?
Yeah. For anyone who doesn't know and also happens to be interested, the ELO rating is basically a way to rate the relative strength of opponents in a zero-sum game or system. So if I'm playing you in chess and you're better than me, and I beat you, I gain a certain number of points, you lose a certain number of points. And those points, the number of points depends on our strength going into it, and our strength going into it depends on how we've done historically. So ELO crunches all of that into one snapshot of how well you're doing at a given moment. And just by way of an example, I believe Brazil is the #1 team, naturally enough, in ELO rating in the world right now. Right, Jordan?
Right. So if you take the matches from 2004 through 2018, there were 27 knockout stage matches between teams with a rating of 100 or greater between them. You know how many times the Underdog won? Twice. 2 out of 27. 7%. Now, when you had closer matches, right, between teams in the knockout stages, you had with an ELO rating of less than 100, you had upsets 38% of the time. But guess what every match has in the round of 16?
Wait,
ELO
everyone?
rating, everyone a rating of 100 or greater. So we could be looking at a seriously chalky quarterfinals, at least going by history.
Right. And today's results, it just amplified that trend. South Korea did not put a hot, likely underdog into the knockout stages. There are it's interesting too, because even when certain teams finish first and therefore playing the second place team in the other group, sometimes those teams are still underdogs, as I'm sure you know. And in every case this year, there's a fairly big gap between the betting or ELO favorite and the underdog. It looks like a pretty chalky season, a pretty chalky cup.
But I guess the one counterfactual to that would be that this World Cup has been pretty weird. We did not have a team that finished in the group stage with 9 points. I'm actually in a picks pool with a bunch of friends, and it presumes every game has a $100 bet on it. And one of my friends basically decided, I'm going to pick every underdog of 4-1 or bigger. And because Tunisia moneyline hit, Australia moneyline hit, Cameroon moneyline hit, and South Korea moneyline hit, that those $100 bets would have resulted in $3,950 if you bet on every big underdog in this group stage. And so do we think that there is anything about this international tournament, perhaps being in the fall, perhaps being in a country that normally doesn't host major tournaments? Is there anything that's weird about this World Cup? And frankly, I'm mostly asking you, talk me into how the USA beats the Netherlands.
Well, that's a great question, first of all, right? Because is there any correlation between the group stage and the knockout stage? We don't know based on history, but I will say this. If you go back to 2002, another place that doesn't necessarily host big international tournaments, right? South Korea, Japan, there were 4 out of 9 knockout stage games with that 100-point difference actually led to upsets. So there is some precedent for a wild, crazy knockout round. And I mean, I'm trying to convince myself too about the US. We can get into that a little bit more, but I'm. It's a question of whether you want to go by history or what you've seen with your eyes in the past couple of weeks, right?
Well, there are a couple of small quirky things. The fact that the home country has to be represented means we got Qatar, which is just only one team, but it means no chance for something like Russia last time around, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, there have been home teams who seeded in and then played really well and made the most of whatever home field advantage is, right?
Yeah. Where does blood doping enter your algorithm?
Blood doping, blood money, it's all part of the game.
I think blood doping we have to research this further. I'm interested in the merits of which gives you more of a performance boost, blood doping or the adrenaline rush of coming out against your home country's authoritarian regime on foreign soil. I mean, I think nothing probably spikes your play more than that, but I don't want to get it. Yeah.
Well, soccer is a weird sport because you could do all this number crunching. I've been in this spot where I feel like I'm in a really good spot here. I like how these teams match up, and 5 minutes into the game, someone takes a red and everything goes out the window. You always have that. Now, we just saw our first red card. It was a second yellow, and it was for a shirt being taken off. The officiating, I think, has been pretty good. Is there anything about your data now that we have so much VAR, now that I haven't been able to celebrate a goal since 2018, immediately after it follows, now that we're getting, according to the data, true results, is that affecting the predictive analysis in any way?
Well, I think it did. I mean, if you think about the Saudi Arabia-Argentina game, where maybe a human ref would just, not even because of bias, just because of natural reflexes, would have let a couple of those offsides go.
Yeah.
The Saudi strategy of pressing high and Argentina just wanting to wipe them off the pitch as fast as they could and literally running offsides 10 times in that game, disallowing multiple goals. I think the VAR probably had a little to do with that, and may not work to the favor. It may work against teams that are usually, don't you think?
Yeah, well, Peter, you highlighted one of the examples where actually VAR targeted the wrong defender, and the line was actually far beyond Lautaro, and you actually had this human error like handshaking with advanced science. So hopefully we don't have one of those things happen. In retrospect, not really of consequence for Argentina. Entering this tournament, Jordan, the favorites were the Blue Bloods, as we all know. Brazil, Argentina, for me, I'm sitting on a future that the continent of South America is going to take this. We were breaking down prior to you guys joining.
That's not an underdog bet, I don't think. South America. I mean,
they were all plush juice. But
we got Antarctica to win.
Was Antarctica not available for your long shot bet?
You got them at plus 140, and I'm still alive. But but is there anything from this tournament, considering we just highlighted a really shocking result that Saudi Arabia beat Argentina, that obviously goes into your data pool, and that wasn't really fluky. I know we mentioned that there were a couple of goals taken off the board there, but by the final whistle, I kind of felt like Saudi Arabia were better on the day, which obviously permeates throughout any sort of analysis that we do for Argentina. And Brazil, rotational squad today, they catch an L. We have none of those big juggernaut teams that were favored to do well in this tournament go through on 9 points into the knockout stages. France kind of mails one in against Tunisia. Is that cause for concern, or because it's a fall World Cup, we just throw it out with the wash, and now all our data that we had prior to, we can apply to this because the group stage was kind of wonky?
It's very hard for any statistical system where you're just putting numbers in, right, to take into account situations where France or Brazil probably could have had 9 points if they wanted to, but didn't play their regular complement of players, right? Those look like sixes in any evaluation system, but they're kind of mix of mostly 6 possible 9s, right? But I will tell you this, looking at teams that pulled big upsets over a set of the last 4 or 5 World Cups, there are a couple of stats that jump out for underdog success. Most of the times, the big naming, right, will dominate or are built actually, and then go out and do it, built to dominate in possession, right? They pile up touches. You know, the old Spain teams from 2010 circa, right? They get 1,200 touches a game, right?
Even the current Spain team does that.
and you can see why it's important. I mean, it's really basic soccer analytics says, you know, to score, you need to shoot. To shoot, you need the ball, right? And if you're controlling the ball, you're not making inaccurate passes. You're not letting the other team have scoring chances of their own, right? It's really valuable. But there are some teams, and you know, it goes back to, you can see it in olden Uruguay teams, the Swedish women's national team. There have been teams built on the idea, well, we just don't have the talent to hog the ball against a Brazil or against, Germany. So
just want you to know, you're speaking Mike's language right now. This is what he thrives on.
Yeah,
so an underdog that doesn't want the ball is Mike's love language in soccer.
I watch the Greek Euro Championship TV once a month.
Okay, so then you'll remember Iceland in the 2016 Euros, or Costa Rica before that.
Wales in those Euros as well.
Right. In fact, Wales against the U.S. in that draw, where these teams are built. You know, let the other team have the ball, run up and down the field, sacrifice possession. But when you really need it, force turnovers, then make long passes. Maybe if you're really lucky, have a cool striker, you know, who can score from a long distance. And
beautiful game.
And guys, to bring this back to the U.S., then, you know, you were mentioning the Confed Cup earlier, right? Mm-hmm. To me, that moment in time was the closest the U.S. had to having a real identity as a really dangerous counterattacking team, absorbing pressure against Spain. That
Charlie Davies on the wing,
and exactly what I was gonna say. Then Charlie Davies is in the car accident, and it all goes to hell. But that 4-man attacking group with him and Josie and Landon and Clint, there was something there that we never got to really see fully formed. But
all right, wait. Before you get more into the U.S., I got to tell you which team, if you love that style of play, hang back, counter-strike effectively. The team for you to watch, and they made it through, is without a doubt Japan.
Yes,
Japan,
but their manager is an idiot.
Oh, well,
wait a minute. Isn't the one thing we've learned that all managers are idiots in the World Cup? At least if you're on Twitter.
Yeah.
But I mean, Japan had the ball 26% of the time, 26% against Germany, 18% against Spain. But the manager, even though he might be crazy, he sent them those subs. They scored late. There was a guy on ESPN who just wrote, Japan will be miserable, suffer for 85 minutes, then beat you in 5 minutes. Let me just give you a couple of these are incredible. I had to write them down. These incredible statistics. Japan in the past 3 games, 1,520 touches. So about 500 a game. Their opponents, a cumulative 2,700 touches. But Japan led their opponents 84-62 in tackles, of course, where you're forcing a turnover without committing a foul, and 71-29 in clearances. So they're just kind of hanging around till they can kick the ball the hell away from their own goal. And if they then score, they then win. That is the kind of one proven underdog strategy. I'm so glad that a Iceland, Wales, Costa Rica type team has made it into the 16. And the ELO gap between them and Croatia is not large. So I'm just going to go here before we say Japan is my personal against Croatia. My personal.
Peter, am I allowed to talk about the U.S. now? Is that okay?
We're not in Iran, so it is okay.
Okay. So
go for it.
In March Madness, our bread and butter, we have a term for a team we like to call the chameleon, which
you couldn't wait for me to get past Japan. That is just very
That's right. That's
very
right.
rude.
We call a team the chameleon when what it takes to win a small conference, beating up on them is not what it takes to beat a bigger team. You have to increase your volatility. You have to take more threes. You have to be more risky, right? High risk, high reward strategies lead to upsets. So teams that can dial up more threes against better competition, change the way they play. Maybe we haven't seen it represented in their statistical analysis earlier in the year. We got a name for them. So my question, and I'll throw it to you guys too, Woody and Mike, is whether the U.S. has some chameleon-like ability. Because what we've seen is they've had these great first halves against 2 teams in Wales and Iran that largely sat back and let us possess the ball. And then when we were pressured, we didn't look like the same team. So the question is, can the U.S. shift to it against a team like the Netherlands that will possess the ball and play a counterattacking style? That, I think, would increase their chance of an upset. Do you think they have that in them?
Let me throw you one stat to underscore what Jordan is saying.
But I don't want to hear from you. I want to hear from Woody and Mike.
Expected goals minus expected goals allowed. Okay, your expected goal differential for the U.S. in the first 60 minutes, U.S. 2.2, opponents 0.9. In the last 30 minutes, cumulatively, U.S. 0.35, opponents 2.2. I'm throwing that out there as a hint to how maybe the U.S. could change its strategy a little bit, or tactics, maybe not old strategy, to change its stripes in order to do better.
What do you guys
think?
What do you take the first?
Yeah. Question? Yeah, so I think as it relates to those last 30 minutes, there's been a lot of criticism of the manager, Greg Berhalter, for not going to substitutions quicker. I also think against both Wales and Iran, their decision was after 70 minutes to basically shut down and not even try and go score goals. And it didn't work against Wales because it gave away a penalty, and it did work against Iran because they went to a back 3 and those guys dealt with the danger. I do wonder, though, how much different the shape of this Netherlands game will be different than what we've seen so far, because in the England game, it was kind of similar. They went at England and then kind of decided, all right, well, we've gone as far as we can go. I also think the fitness of the U.S. players doesn't always last, particularly among their starters, some of whom had injury risks going into the World Cup. Yunus Musa, in particular, seems to run out of gas towards the end of games. Serginho Dest
and Weston.
Right,
sure.
yeah. Weston McKennie, Serginho Dest have not been able to look good and strong for 90 minutes, and maybe some of those guys will have to play 120 tomorrow. So
wait, where is Gio Reyna? Is there a good answer to the question?
I think he would have played more in the Iran game if they needed a goal.
Somebody not meeting hostage demands or something. Is he just
No, I mean, Greg Berhalter and his father Claudio go way back. They're childhood friends, and so it does not make a ton of sense. I think the games other than the England game have not really called for Gio Reyna because you're protecting leads or you're trying to get one super late. But I think in this game, I'm anticipating a low-scoring game entering the second half, and he'll have to come on and try and make a difference. But either way, I think there are a lot of reasons why the U.S. have not closed games well. To answer your question, though, about the chameleon point, I think we saw against England that they can play differently. And yeah, they'll have some of the ball. When they get the ball, they'll play with quality, and it's not just lump the ball up the field. They'll actually try and play a little bit. But they were able to absorb more pressure and be better defensively in that game. So yeah, I think they can be different. And I think the Netherlands haven't really showed a ton of strength against good opposition in terms of being able to break teams down, other than with long distance efforts from Cody Gakpo. So I think that they will be able to nullify, I think, a lot of what the Netherlands are trying to do, and that's their hope.
We'll get knee deep into our own analysis after we see our good pals Jordan and Peter off. But to answer your question, I will answer your question with a question. There are reports now coming out that Netherlands have been bitten by the flu bug, and their key playmaker Frankie de Jong is among these players that have been affected. I don't know if you can plug that into predictive analysis, but as games wear on, we see teams get sloppy with the ball because they're fatigued. If a team is battling throughout the week with illness, I'm not sure we're going to get a team that's willing to be on the ball as much. So I think the answer for the U.S. in being this counterattacking team that I've always longed for is within the personnel on the team sheet available to Greg Berhalter. I don't necessarily trust him to pick that team. We have the speed for it. We have the type of players that can get on a counter and not get dispossessed, Gio Reyna being one of them, but I don't really trust the manager. So
Netherlands, 10 shots against Senegal, total value 0.7 expected goals. Two shots against Ecuador, total expected value 0.1. I can't throw the effects of flu in with any precision, but I feel
if you were good at your job, you would.
I feel they need to play the World Cup every 15 years, and I'd have the right. But I feel pretty safe in predicting the Netherlands is not going to mount a high intensity scoring attack. And that
especially against a very strong American team. I want to ask you guys one question before we get you out of here. If you look at the matchups, Netherlands against the U.S. and Argentina and Australia, the games tomorrow. The rest of the knockout round: England against Senegal, France against Poland. Don't bother picking Poland. Japan and Croatia, Brazil and South Korea, Morocco and Spain, Portugal and Switzerland. You told us about Japan. Who else should we look for that are not the favorites at the moment?
Peter?
I like the U.S. Just be careful if you bet on them, because betting markets have already made the U.S. I think there's a plus 175, which implies
really
a winning percentage. Yeah, a chance of winning of something like 35-36%.
Those reports of the flu must have really impacted.
So that's really high. I like them in real life, not to bet. And by the way, Poland. Talk about your chameleons. How many shots does Lewandowski get playing for Barcelona? 4.5 a game, right?
Yep.
He's had 3 shots in 3 games so far this World Cup. Get the man the ball, you'll see a different team.
Get the man the ball in deep positions. If you watch his heat map, he's just hanging out at the midway line when the bulk of his touches, when he's on the club scene, are in that final third. There's just no plan for Poland. We hate watching them. Jordan, Peter, thank you guys so much for joining us. Make sure to check out the Underdogs podcast as a part of the Le Batard and Friends family. It's great to see them mixing it up with us here on Morally Abhorrent and getting some really good soccer analysis out there. And thank you for co-signing on my Japan bet that I have already locked in. That is my super dog of the knockout round. Fellas, welcome back anytime. Thank you so much. We'll bid them adieu, Chris, and then you and I are going to be getting into our preview of USA Netherlands. It's the knockout stages here, Chris. It's the next biggest game in U.S. men's national team history. And as I just alluded to, reports out of the media covering this Dutch team say they have been battling through illness, and if what Peter tells us is right, the price has tumbled down, which is obviously a great sign if you're a U.S. supporter. I don't necessarily know if I'm going to just pick the U.S. straight up to win this game, because draw is an available option. We'll go 90 or 98, whatever, and then go into extra time. I can see this game being resolved after regulation. I fear that's what's going to happen. However, despite Musa and McKinney really tailing off in these second halves, I got to think this Netherlands team, being as sick as they are, that's going to rear its ugly head the deeper that this thing goes. I don't think the Netherlands are that good. I just don't think they're that good right now. And on top of that, they're sick. I was going to do the patriotic thing and pick the U.S. anyways, Witty, but now am I expecting this? Am I foolish to?
Yeah, and just to clarify, Louis van Gaal today said at his press conference that all 26 players went through training, but admitted that he is fearful of an illness spreading through the group. He said if it goes around in the group, it is worrying. So those are the quotes coming in from today. I mean, I was talking with a friend of mine who's Brazilian, and I was kind of like, yeah, how do you have any confidence? You know, it wasn't great. And it's like, what do you mean? I'm a Brazil fan. I have confidence. I'm not used to having confidence, and yet there's just something about this matchup where the Netherlands are not particularly dynamic with the ball and not going to shred a team apart unless they're Qatar. And so I think that the U.S. have a genuine chance to win this tie. And I say this tie because if I were to say the game, that would imply that they win in regulation. I don't necessarily think that this game is going to go to end in regulation. The draw actually does not go off at that impressive of a price. It's only plus 235. And so I'm going to look for a prop to see, you know, what the prop is for the game to go to extra time, because that's sort of been my feeling, because the U.S. ultimately have not been terribly dynamic going forward either, as Peter illustrated, particularly in the last half hour of games. I guard against my own optimism, because the Netherlands are ultimately the Netherlands. They're the 3 times runners up. They've got some really good players in Virgil van Dijk, in Frankie de Jong, and an emerging talent in Cody Gakpo at this tournament. Some other players that obviously play at a very high level, including Manchester City's Nathan Ake will be a part of that back line, and a few others as well. But there's just something, I feel like the U.S. has a team that's there for the taking. The U.S. can do this. The U.S. can do this. And by the way, if they do, there's a chance that if Argentina beat Australia, they play Lionel Messi in Argentina in a World Cup quarterfinal on a Friday afternoon. And I hope the entire country gets the chance to play hooky and go and watch it. The mere notion gets me so fired up. And so I think I'm going to stick with my prediction. 0-0 after 90 minutes, 0-0 after 120. The U.S. win on penalties. That's how I think this game is going to go.
All right, I'm going to tease the audience a little bit more. I want to break this down a little bit. In rattling off the names of the Dutch players that you did, De Jong and Van Dijk, they're good players, and I think would be rated more than any of the other Americans that are going to see this pitch. But top to bottom, there isn't a huge talent discrepancy between these two teams.
That's wild to say. To say.
You have Gakpo, but outside of him, the most informed player is Tyler Adams. Christian Pulisic is one man of the match. He's been good. If the U.S. play their most talented lineup, this isn't, and I think the odds makers are starting to come around on that, this isn't a huge underdog by any stretch of the imagination, especially if we're doing this thing based on current form. I love this stingy identity that the U.S. has carved out for it. And if you can see, there's a change in my body language. I'm that video game meme. I'm at the edge of my seat because I'm starting to tap into that attitude that I had against England. I'm relishing in this. But this isn't England. This isn't England. This is not as tough a sledding as it may seem based off of historical reputation. I like where we're positioned here. Before I give my final prediction, though, what 11 would you like to see out there, Witty? Because I think we found something with Cameron Carter-Vickers. I've come around on that selection. I want to see Walker Zimmerman, not just because of his man bun and his incredible eyes, or the fact that he joined us recently on the Dan Le Batard Show, wherever you get your podcasts on the local hour. That was a great interview, and that's since been picked up and gone a little bit viral. Shout out to Captain Americock. That's not Walker Zimmerman. That's Christian Pulisic. I want to see him out there because of the set pieces, and I want to see the aerial duel of man buns on those set pieces of Walker Zimmerman and Virgil van Dijk. Dest and Robinson. This means no Tim Ream. Is that a mistake against this opponent?
I think you're making a decision between Carter-Vickers and Zimmerman. I think you're choosing which one of those two players you want to pick. I think Ream is definitely going to be the left center back.
Okay.
So the question is, which of those two guys Do you prefer
who's better suited for this?
I think it's Zimmerman, just because it's a more defensive game. I think they pick Carter Vickers because of his ability to play line splitting passes and be better going forward. This is a game where you're more concerned about defending. However, I do. So you said, well, the talent gap isn't that big. So I just looked up the Netherlands sort of ideal 11. I'm picking the Ecuador game as an example. I think the U.S. is better in goal. I think Matt Turner is a better goalkeeper than Andries Noppert, who plays in goal for Herenveen in Holland. I think Matt Turner is a better goalkeeper. Center backs, you'll give them. If it's Zimmerman or if it's Carter Vickers, no matter what, Zimmerman and Ream versus they play out of a back three.
I'll give them fullback too. Dumfries is a real good player.
Yeah. Dumfries on the right, but Daley Blind is their left wing back.
No,
I think I'd rather have Anthony Robinson than Daley Blind. Yeah, I mean.
Okay.
I mean, Daley Blind is 32 and is
Dumfries is the best fullback on the
Oh,
on
for
the
sure.
pitch.
For sure. But Dest is second, I think, of the fullbacks between these two teams. And so and Dest, by the way, in terms of this game having sort of interesting narrative, he was born in the Netherlands. He played a lot of his career, came through the academy at Ajax. He is largely sort of a Dutch figure who the US spotted, put him in their youth national teams and convinced him to play at senior level. When Ronald Koeman and the Dutch national team were putting on a full court press, Serginho Dest picked the U.S. And
I think Dest would figure in their starting 11.
I agree. I mean, in the current system, no, they probably play Dumfries higher though. Okay, so let's keep going. De Jong probably better than any American midfield, but their second midfielder is Toon Koopmeiners, and you definitely take Tyler Adams over him.
He's a different type of midfielder than any the U.S. have.
Right.
We don't have that ultra playmaking midfielder. I mean, we could if we change the formation around and maybe move some of the pieces that aren't playing as much into the lineup. But yeah, De Jong is certainly, from a playmaking perspective, out of that midfield, the choice.
And then, so the other two midfielders will likely be Toon Koopmeiners, who plays for Atalanta, good team, but again, not a hugely impressive talent, and Davy Klaassen, who plays for Ajax at 29, had his try in the Premier League. I think I'd rather have any of the American midfielders over Klaassen, and maybe Koopmeiners over one, probably Musa, just on the basis of having proved himself, but on the basis of talent, I think I'd rather have Musa. And then you look at the forward line, you take Gakpo, and Pulisic is an interesting conversation, but I would definitely rather have, Tim Weah over any of the other players that would partner with Cody Gakpo. Likely it'll be either Steven Bergwijn or, maybe even Vincent Janssen. Like
it's been a weird World Cup for Bergwijn. It really has. It really has. Memphis is, him versus Weah. Memphis is a better player.
Him
and Gakpo have really kind of found a nice little 1-2 as well. And when he is on, he's a kind of a helter-skelter player, though.
Yeah.
Memphis. He can go missing.
He's all over the place. Yeah, he can be the best player on the field or the worst player on the field. He's a very high variance game. However, he is not 100% fit. He started the game against Qatar to try and get himself some fitness in a game that they didn't really need to win. And
what's going on with Bergwijn?
I think it's sort of they would rather pick Memphis. And they play out of a front two. Gakpo is definitely one. And then you're picking between Berghaus and Bergwijn and Memphis for that other spot.
All right. So
ultimately, I mean, you go through it, and it's not, like you said, it's not a massive talent difference.
It's just I'm also applying Gio and Brendan Aronson, and neither of those players may feature in our starting 11.
Yeah.
So it's just hard. In my choice starting 11, the talent discrepancy, while I still give the edge slightly to the Dutch, it's not open and shut by any stretch of the imagination. And probably talking this one out for you, I undersold how good Dumfries is. He is quite good. All right, so here's my prediction for tomorrow's big game. We're going to be out at Bottled Blonde. We're going to be with you live on our YouTube page, youtube.com/LeBatard and Friends. If you're watching us right now, thank you so much. Log in, create an account. If you don't trust me, it's not the hardest thing in the world. Give us a subscription. Reward Middle Arc Media for all the hard work that they're putting in for this World Cup. You'll get a notification anytime we go live. So please subscribe to us. We're going to be live pregame, halftime, and post-match immediately with our thoughts, opinions. I'm very curious to see this starting 11. Okay, my prediction is the U.S. advances. And I think if I were to make an official bet, I'd say it's probably going to be 0-0 at halftime. So I'm going to be looking at that first half under. I think we go to pens.
Wow.
I think we go to pens, and pens is anybody's game. But at that point, let's keep this train rolling, and we'll go out against Argentina, no doubt. I'm not even going to watch that Argentina. That's going to be the first game of this tournament that I'm going to miss because I'm going to see a rock concert. Look, man, anytime I can watch Muse and Jack White in Phoenix on the beach, I'm going to do that instead of watching Aaron Moy. I'm sorry, Australia. So I'm really hoping we can keep this run going. This is not the Dutch team that I thought it would be entering this tournament. I have not been impressed with them. And on top of that, they're sick. I like my chances, and I like the stingy defense, and I like this identity that the U.S. has carved out for itself. And I really like this midfield. And hopefully we're definitely going to see Acosta in this game. And I really hope we see Gio Reyna, because there's going to be an opportunity where a goal will be there for us, and we're going to need some creativity. We're going to need some imagination. We're going to need someone to take somebody on the ball and move past him and create something out of nothing. Will it be Christian Pulisic? How fit is he? We see the reports that he's good to go. I'm encouraged. There was no way he was missing this game, but will it affect that quick burst of energy? This is a fast twitch muscle guy. He can go on a dime. Is that pelvic injury going to hinder that? Will we see Josh Sargent? Or will we go to Haji Wright and do what we did against England? Can that game plan that we had against England be applied to the Dutch? I don't necessarily think so. It's a different team. Either way, I don't think there's that much separation when I look at the talent here. And if I'm looking at underdogs and I'm looking for value, number one choice on my sheet is Japan. Number two is the U.S. Number two is the U.S. from a value perspective. So I think the U.S. advanced, Woody. How about that?
How about that?
I had them last in the group, and now I have them going to the quarterfinal.
In a quarterfinal against Argentina, which, by the way, you have to eat a printed out text if you do that.
While jumping into the pool.
That's right. By the way, U.S. to win on penalties is plus 800. Plus 800 for the U.S. to win on penalties. I'll look up the first half under as well. And the U.S., as Peter Keating mentioned, are plus 175 to advance. If you want to bet them to win the game in regulation, they're plus 350 to win the game in regulation. First half under, plus 140 on 0-0 at halftime. So those are the odds of the bets that you've put forward.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching, especially you, Angel Rivera, who's spot on with your analysis. I do need a drink, and I'll get right to it, sir. I'll get right to it. Beginning at 7 a.m. tomorrow, too. Oh, yeah. If you want Marble Mouth Mike with a dyed beard, he's coming your way at Bottled Blonde tomorrow. All right. I'm not going to wear a ridiculous shirt, though. I copped the authentic tie-dye one. U.S. Soccer was very nice, and they gave us free ones, but it said Mike Ryan on the back, and that is just so not my style. I am never going to wear a shirt with my name on the back. So
yeah,
I'm going to have to... I went out and bought. I had to go double XL because your boy got chunky over the holidays. Chunky.
Yeah. No, I tried to put on a Nigeria shirt that I have.
Oh
no,
I can't.
No, I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't
wear any of the soccer jerseys I bought. I just have to start anew. Okay, I'm just a double XL now. I'm not gonna lose the weight. What do you mean you're not gonna do it?
No.
I'm not gonna do anything about it. What I'm gonna do about it is buy double XLs from now on.
No, we can't. You and I have to commit to downsize. I'm inching towards XL, and I got to get back down to L.
All right, for one last time, before we speak to you before the game tomorrow, let's go.